You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold, episode 22. Today we have a very special guest, Miss Molly Parmer. How are you?
I'm great. I'm happy to be here.
Good. So Molly is a natural at fighting the government. She was born to be a criminal defense attorney, and we're just so pleased to have you on here. A special, you have a lot of different things that you do. You're not only a criminal defense attorney, you're on court TV, analyzing cases. I mean, you're teaching at Emory. Super cool stuff. You have an awesome story. We featured you June 22nd this past summer. And so we want to talk about that first. So thanks for being here, all the way from Atlanta.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So like I said, you were featured on Lawyer Stories June 22nd. Your story was like incredibly well written. Like I went back and read it. It was like I was reading like a thesis from like, I don't know, just like an amazing essay. So you talk about your family. Like let's start like growing up. Like you talk about being in poverty, and I read something else that you wrote that said 1 out of 3 kids grow up in poverty. You had a theme in your story about shoes, like why you didn't understand like why you couldn't have new shoes, and like your appliances didn't work, but you dedicated yourself to studying. So I thought that was really interesting. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my poverty, I think, was fairly unique when you look at American kids that grow up in poverty. And I think it's because my parents, their parents did not grow up in poverty. Their parents were educated. My mom's mom had a master's degree. My dad's dad had a doctorate. And so my parents grew up in these really nice, comfortable suburban homes with a lot of structure and a lot of education. Right. But they were just, age-wise, part of that generation that really believed in tune in, turn on, and drop out. And my dad, he was older when it comes to the hippies. And so he became essentially a leader in the movement. Right. And so this is all before I was born.
They called it like a yippie?
He was a yippie, yeah. Right. So the yippies were kind of led by Abby Hoffman, who he was the author of Steal This Book, which my dad was the illustrator for, which is kind of the tome of radical 60s, protesters. And my dad really did have a pretty significant role in that movement. And he became, I think in a lot of ways, my mom and my dad were very different than where they came from. And almost, as happens in generations, I'm very different in a lot of ways than them. Like, right. I think I wanted structure, and I wanted, for example, to be a lawyer practicing in federal court. That was very attractive to me. Whereas I think other kids, maybe if your dad is corporate, you want to be a rock star. Like I never wanted to be a rock star.
But it's super interesting because a connection I made today while kind of like looking over some items and things that, we've talked in the past, and like a connection I made is that you are like, a high profile attorney, you're doing all these things, you're organized, like you like the structure, but you're also doing criminal defense work for like all different types of crimes. So like, tell me about like the connection that you feel between your late father, who was a famous cartoonist. Like his stuff is amazing. Like I actually want to ask you about your favorite piece too, if there's one, but like, so tell me about like the connection between like being a criminal defense attorney and being an advocate for like any type of crime, and like where your parents were growing up without like any structure and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's the connection. It was born and bred into me. And I remember being very little and being cognizant that my parents were very different. And I was explicitly taught that, you don't trust police. I remember, in terms of like profanity, my dad was like, there's no such thing as bad words, only bad thoughts. And we don't criminalize speech in this house. And like, so, and he also had a tattoo. It said smash the state. That was like one of his slogans. And
Smash the state, okay.
Smash the state tattooed a huge sleeve tattoo. Wow. And then the other sleeve had like devils on it. And all of it was his art. But, he perpetuated those ideas around me when I was as young as like pre-K, yeah. And so I definitely, and a lot of that stems again from his radical sensibilities in the late 60s. The government's corrupt, police are racist, decriminalize all drugs. I mean, that was all of the rhetoric that I grew up with as a little tiny kid. And so it came very naturally to me once I discovered that this was something I could do as a profession and wanting to be a professional to defend those accused of crimes, because I was raised to believe that, first of all, things that are crimes shouldn't be crimes to begin with. And second of all, sometimes you should do them anyways, because I was exposed certainly to a lot of crimes, in my house. Like there were guns and there were drugs and there were felons, in my home. But my parents' perception was that they don't, they weren't judgmental at all. And they were very open-minded. And so for me, I don't care what you've done. I've probably personally seen worse or been part of worse,
So where do you stand? Like, I know where you are professionally, like, what about personally? Like, do you stand in those sort of lines? Like, for me, it's sort of like, if it doesn't harm somebody physically, like, I don't really think it should be like a big deal sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that's an overbroad statement. I'm sure you could pick it apart, but like, how about yourself?
Well, it sounds like you're an ethical hedonist, which is good.
Hedonist, that's an interesting word. That might be a different podcast.
I come from a place of, I think, profound forgiveness, and nothing happens in a vacuum. And I think because of how I was raised, it was not easy. It was a very difficult childhood. And especially when you're smart and, I just didn't have access to a lot of things. And I just learned also that nothing happens in a vacuum, and that people behave in certain ways because of circumstances beyond their control. And so for me, I think I'm very forgiving, and I don't care what somebody has done. I would like to stand beside them and be their advocate. But I think in terms of my philosophy, I do subscribe to a lot of the same things that my parents believe, that we do have an overreach of government, that we are a society that over-criminalizes, and that mass incarceration solves no problems.
So what about, like, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, we can move on, but what about everything going on today, like with defund the police and all that? Like, is that something your father would have been like really into? And like, do you think, or your parents, and how do you feel about it?
Yeah, for sure. I think that my parents basically started this movement in like 1967 and 68, and now it's coming home to roost. It's the exact same ideas that they were trying to perpetuate in society and amongst young people 50 years ago. So I know that they, I believe that my dad would certainly support this idea that police are, there's a lot of brutality at the hands of police, and they're incredibly funded and protected. And for me personally, I have a little bit of a different perspective, because as a criminal defense lawyer, I've defended police,
Right.
Oh, absolutely. And they're some of my favorite clients. And that's because I believe that everybody deserves a defense, even a police officer. But at the same time, I do believe that the defund police movement is pretty on point, because they are incredibly funded in communities that are lacking funding elsewhere. So I believe in kind of what's been said in terms of reapportion this money.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. They have a big burden on them, and there are certain things that can be sort of delegated elsewhere, I think, when there's things that come up. Maybe that's a little too soft of a view, but so, like, tell me, like, one thing I love finding out about people, and I ask it probably every show, is like, when did you know you wanted to be a lawyer? I mean, I know you were young, but like, when was that day where you were like, that's the thing I'm gonna do?
I wasn't young. It's a second career, actually.
Okay.
So
right, you were a teacher.
Yeah, I was.
I'm just showing you that I did. I know.
You did such good research. I am just beyond impressed.
Thanks.
I taught students with behavior disorders in Title I schools. So again, I was drawn to that, I think, because again, these marginalized populations and poverty, And I liked the bad kids, right? The quote unquote bad kids. I wouldn't call them that, but that's how society and the school system saw them. And I would sometimes be a liaison between the public schools and the psychoed school where you go if your behavior is considered not appropriate for a regular public school. And I loved those kids. Those kids reminded me of my dad. And those kids,
Right. Okay.
I don't know, there was something about them that I was able to bond with. But I would say I always, education was so valued in my family. And again, I think it's because of my parents. And I am such an academic. Like, I love school. And I think basically as a teacher, I was teaching for 5 years, and I came to a point where I thought, I should get a graduate degree. And law made sense, I think, because I am academic in those same respects. I'm good at synthesizing, a lot of material, and I'm good at written expression and all of that. And so ultimately what I did was just do what I usually do in an academic setting and really devote myself to the study. And in this case, it was of the LSAT. And, once I killed it and scored above the 99th percentile.
Wow. Okay.
Then I got into the best schools, in the country, but ultimately for me, taking a full scholarship, given my financial position.
Right.
And I was, if I didn't get a full ride, I wouldn't have gone,
Yeah, no, that's smart. And, so you went up a little later, like you taught for what, like 4 or 5 years, you said?
5 years. Yeah.
5 years after college.
Yeah.
And so that kind of goes back to like things that I feel like advice that I would give somebody wanting to go to law school. Like, hindsight's 2020, but like you see people going to law school like straight from college, and you're like gung ho. But like, if you really have to be smart about it and look at the finances and like look at all these things, and these are things that kids who are like 22, like a lot of them like aren't looking at. Like, some of them will, but like a lot of them aren't. I mean, I have a lot of things that I could say about that topic, but I think the way that you went about it sounds very, very smart, and very thought out. So that's good. Instead of racking up debt to go to you might have gone to a school that somewhere else, but actually you went to a very good law school. I mean,
I went to a great law school, but I think you're right. Yeah, I went to a great law school, and I have no regrets. And I do think you're right in that if I was to recommend, should somebody go to law school straight out, after undergrad, or should they wait and they're on the fence about that, I would always say wait. I waited 5 years. I was a different person. I was more developed. I had already had a structured, job that demanded a lot from me. And I think the financial decision was a lot easier to enter into as somebody with, more finances to take care of and a bit more of an adult sense of responsibility. Right. So I feel really lucky. I look back on my law school experience and just being a lawyer. And overall, I'm not one of those people that's jaded or disillusioned. I am so grateful. I am so grateful to my law school. It changed my life.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome. I mean, I took a year off, but it wasn't enough. Like, I think like if I went later, I would have been more focused. I would have had more, I think time management is very important to know. Like, if you work a job, like that's a traditional 9 to 5, you learn a structure of a day. And I think like that's very important for law school. If you don't know the structure day, if you're going from classes in undergrad that are like at 10:30 and 2:30, it's like hard to really figure out the day unless somebody really guides you. So I get that.
Right.
So that's good stuff. So was there any other type of lawyer that you ever would have been, like in terms of practicing, or was it always criminal defense?
So it's interesting, I think one of the reasons why I hesitated to say completely, I look back and everything was great. So I got this amazing opportunity. I was a named fellow at my school, and I got paid to go. I had a stipend and everything was paid for. And I got there, and here I am, like a little hippie girl who's a school teacher and older than most people there. And I go through the first year and I'm like, I don't relate to anybody here. I had friends, I guess. And I went to school where I already kind of lived. And so I knew the city, but I was very confused at the population of students there. I don't think I'd ever met people who were that caliber of wealth, I guess I could say.
Oh, yeah, I bet. Yep.
I had only gone to public schools, and my undergrad, which was incredibly academically rigorous, Georgia Tech, was also very blue collar. So I just didn't have exposure to kids that were so young and would have Mercedes, and it was just incredible. And also their goals were to become like corporate lawyers. And I felt like, okay, well, maybe I made a mistake, right? Like maybe my academics are fine, but in terms of my goals, maybe I should consider leaving. Like I don't have that much in terms of losses to recoup at this point. So so my first year, I thought about dropping out, and I actually spoke to a couple of professors that I really respected, because that's the kind of thing that I would do, because I am a nerd at heart. And so I went to these teachers.
That's the thing you should do. Like, that's the stuff I look back and I'm like, I don't have any regret. All right, go ahead. This is about you. We're talking Molly Parmer here. Go for it.
No, but this is actually kind of like dovetails back into who I am now and opportunities that I have. But so I went to one professor that she taught evidence and con law, and she was brilliant, and I loved her class. And I went to her office and I'm like, look, I think maybe my personality is not going to work out here, and my goals aren't really lining up with like the programming. And she said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I went to Georgia Tech, so I thought, I've been pushed to kind of consider IP. And she was like, no. She said, I don't know. I was blind, right? I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, you don't know. You don't know.
I don't know. And she said, well, I do a lot of work with the Georgia Innocence Project. Why don't you consider trading out your IP externship for one with GIP, Georgia Innocence Project? And I said, okay, that sounds interesting. I didn't know anything about it. I end up changing my schedule around last minute, sliding into this externship, just because there happened to be an opening, and it changed everything. At that point, I knew I wanted to be a public defender. I wanted to do criminal defense. I came back, I founded the Criminal Law Society. I'm now on the board of GIP. Like, it changed everything.
So it felt comfortable. Like, you found something and all of a sudden that was it. Like, that was the time. It's amazing. So like, at what point did you think to yourself, wow, like, I feel like this has a connection, like, back to my roots. Like, this is pretty cool.
I think that internship at GIP, and it's so interesting because I couldn't even see that within myself. Everything's so standardized your first year.
Yeah.
I'm like, property is lame, contracts is lame, Civ Pro is lame. I don't like any of this. I always thought I would be a trial lawyer, and it wasn't explained to me your first year that you can be, but you're just not going to learn trial techniques your first year. I'm like, where's the trial techniques?
And now you teach advanced trial techniques at Emory,
same school. Yeah, the same school. But I was really lucky that somebody, this professor knew me well enough. I had her for 2 semesters at that point. And she also was on the committee that selected me for the fellowship. So she knew me and knew my personal statement and knew enough about me to say, kind of nudge me and say, I think this is a good fit. And as soon as I was there, and even like the company that was there, these students from other schools that were less focused on corporate work and really like, defending the wrongfully convicted. I mean, it's the most virtuous work imaginable. And it was a laid back environment. And I loved like talking to the incarcerated clients, and it just changed everything. It was like a switch was flipped and I was 100% on board and never looked back.
Yeah.
And that was it.
So that's like a great feeling to just be like love what you do. It just doesn't feel like work and that whole cliche sort of thing, but that's amazing. Let me ask you like a question, a little off topic. So if a person graduated law school, say they're a lawyer, and like, but they feel like they want to learn, like, say it's like 10, 15 years later, but they didn't take the class that like they should have, like, say it's like trial ad. Do you think they could call their school and be like, hey, look, like, I graduated from you guys 15 years ago. Can I just like jump into one of these trial ad classes and learn how to be a trial lawyer? Like, or wills and trusts, like, say they want to start doing wills. Like, do you think they could, like, the school would make an exception, be like, hey, yeah, come on back? Like,
well, I don't know. I don't know, but I do know that some of my like fellow attorneys here in Atlanta have asked to sit in my class, and I haven't run it by the university. But I think like here and there, if somebody wanted to come sit in advanced criminal trial advocacy, it's a night course. It would be outside of business hours. I might allow it here and there. So
okay,
my advice would be find the individual professors and see if you can kind of circumvent,
right. Well, it would be like sort of monitoring the class. What do you call the word? I don't know. But so, all right. So another.
Don't get me in trouble. I'm not going to.
So another question. No, I'm just trying to think of the word. Like when you survey a class, you just sit there and
surveying a class. Yeah, you're auditing it. You're auditing it.
Auditing it. Yes. Okay. So another question. So like you do trial ad, advanced trial ad. Do you do anything else? Like, oh, by the way, let me get this on the record here, on the Zoom record, just so you know. One of my best grades. I won the Cali in criminal procedure. So I just wanted you to know that. That's big time court TV criminal defense lawyer.
Well,
it's somewhere. I could send you a snapshot of it. Anyway,
I'm honored to be in your presence. Let me make that clear for the record.
So I just wanted you to know that because I was very proud of that award, even though I work in housing right now. So Anyway, I was gonna.
Housing is important too, you know.
Housing, it's a super important thing. Let's move on. So criminal defense, right? So you are defending people accused of crimes. Like what if you know like they actually did the crime? Like how does that work? Like if they did the crime, but they're like, hey, I need you to go to trial for me, like I'm innocent. And like, but it's like a heinous, like disgusting crime. Like how does that, like what's the law around that and how does that work?
Yeah. I think that, you know, most criminal defense lawyers who are diehards like myself, they kind of have the same ethos, but then mine pushes the boundaries beyond that. So I think most criminal defense lawyers, you know, within our criminal system, it's not like you hear from one side, the prosecution, and the other, the defense, and you make a decision. That's not how it works at all. The prosecution is the minister of justice. I don't do justice. I do rights. Okay. So justice is not my concern. If you want to do justice, go be a prosecutor, or better yet, like do something else. But, you know, I think the idea here is that the prosecutors bring the charges, they have the burden of proof, and my job is to stand between my client and them and say, if you want to get him, you come through me. And I'm going to make sure that I don't care what heinous, horrible thing he did, he is entitled to the same due process and the fair trial that all of us, you know, get under the US Constitution. And so it's very patriotic work, I would say. Like a lot of us really believe in America's system in theory, and this idea, it's almost like this Mother Teresa approach. Nobody is as bad as the one thing they did where they got caught. You find empathy and you use that to develop mitigation and to stand with somebody when they're terrified. You know, we've all done things that are wrong, whether moral or criminal, and to stand next to somebody and be their advocate. It takes a certain kind of person, but it takes a person, I think, that does have empathy, you know?
Was it more about mitigation or is it more about denying like what they did, even though you knew like what, like they did it? Like,
yeah, case by case. But I've certainly had cases where the client's like, I did it, let's go to trial, you know? Okay. And in those cases, you go to trial, you know? Okay. I love trial. And also, so my philosophy, and this is unique to me, I think, although I'm sure other lawyers also ascribe to this mentality, but I don't believe that the involvement of the government has any better outcome for anyone. So let's say a child molestation is committed.
Okay, and that goes back to smash the state, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think putting that child on the stand as a prosecutor, I mean, what are they going to do once they win their conviction? They're not going to follow up with that kid 3 years later. And we see these cycles, and, you know, this kid may become an abuser in their own way, and nobody follows up or cares about it. And I think that the system and mass incarceration perpetuates crime in a way that truly a holistic approach to dealing with misbehavior or addiction or a lot of these things that underpin crime would make for a better society. I don't believe that involving the government and doing a prosecution is like a way to make everybody whole and happy. And that's my philosophy. So bring it, you know, I'll try anything. And I do it for, you know, just the sake that, you know, that's not the solution, right? Like we don't have good prisons. We don't have a way to rehabilitate people. It doesn't make the situation better. So might as well come in there and be, you know, a really killer trial lawyer and make them do their job, right?
So do you really have to think on your feet a lot as a trial lawyer? You do.
Absolutely. There's a ton of prep, right? You have to love it and you have to get obsessed with it. And then you also have to have instinct for sure. So it's kind of a balance, but definitely.
So speaking of, and I don't mean to pivot, but I think I remember what I wanted to ask regarding you being a professor. So you teach advanced criminal trial ad. Yeah. Anything else in the classroom or no? Because my question is regarding, and I brought this up before on past shows, because the Socratic method.
Yeah.
Like, is that you at Emory? Like, you probably can't do that, like teaching trial ads.
Yeah. My class is a little different. So
it's different because people are up there like doing presentation, like doing their closings, and
it's definitely sufficiently intense, I think, for a law school course. Yeah. I have very high expectations, you know, and my students know that. But I do teach, you know, I come into Emory and I teach a few other things as well throughout the year, but mostly just like, you know, like a one-time presentation on professionalism, or they have a trial skills academy in the summer that I joined. But my class, it's only for 3Ls, and it always has an insane wait list. It only, you know, we only have a few. And my favorite thing is that last year it created a black market where somebody was offering like $500 to sell their spot on the wait list.
Are you serious? Do you get like 10% or something?
Well, I wasn't involved in that, but I was very proud.
Yeah.
Because the Emory education is so expensive to begin with. It made me feel so proud. I love a black market.
Do they look at you? You love a black market. Do they look at you as like a celebrity professor?
No, I don't think. Well, you have to ask them. I mean, I think that, you know, I'm fairly new in private practice. I haven't even been in private practice a year. So I think they look at me like a diehard public defender, right?
Right.
But, you know, ever since private practice, it has been a lot of media, and I think I have come into it very naturally. And now maybe this year maybe I'll be more of a celebrity.
Do you think you'll expand your role at Core TV?
I don't know. I think they like me. I mean, it's funny because I wanted to do it, and then I just kind of got, you know, you just kind of get randomly selected by their booking people. Okay. And I went once and I had the best time, and they asked me to come. You know, I'm fairly regular. I'm on, you know, every couple weeks or so, and I have a good relationship. But it's funny because a lot of the hosts are former prosecutors. Yeah. And I wonder if, you know, sometimes I don't want to offend them, but I also want to speak for, you know, the people. And yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. So far, so good. But I guess if I say the wrong thing at the wrong time, maybe they won't like me as much and I'll get cut. But for now, it's going.
No, I think you got a terrific future there. So okay. So I don't mean to switch around. Maybe that's just like okay. Yeah. So going back to the defending crime. So it's my understanding, and it's been a while, but like unless it's something that's imminent or somebody's going to cause danger in that like imminent danger, like you don't have to really. You're not going to like tell the police if they're going to go like say to you, if they confess, they're going to go like kill somebody, right? Do you have to go like, you have to kind of turn them in, right? I mean, if they're your client and they say, hey, look, I did this, you could still, you know, negotiate some sort of like a better deal. Like can you just, clarify that for me?
Yeah, I think, you know, what you're thinking about is kind of confidentiality rules and how, especially with like patient and doctor confidentiality, if there is risk to somebody else, they do have a duty to I'm not a mandatory reporter, you know, so I have all kind of conversations with my clients, and they're all confidential, and confidentiality lasts after the case is closed, after they're deceased. It lasts forever. So I have heard some things and I know some things, and I will not be repeating any of those things ever. And that's the nature of the job. Honestly, I love when I first meet a client, let's say they're incarcerated, and I go to see them in a jail. I love going to jails, and I sit across from them and I'm like, all right, here's confidentiality. Here's how it works. And if I feel like they're, you know, with me and they feel open and trusting, I say, tell me what happened. And so I know a lot, you know. I think oftentimes I know more about the case through investigation, through serious, diligent work, and through client relationships than does the government, you know?
I mean, do they ask you, like, did your client do it? Like, they can't really.
They can't ask anything like that. No, yeah, they cannot ask anything in terms of that discussion. And so my client says, I did it, but I want to plead to, you know, a different charge that it's not the most serious thing I do. It's very normal to try and negotiate something like that. And it's also normal to have a case where the government doesn't offer you anything. If like the offer is life, you try the case. And I think people forget that. Like if there's not an offer on the table, or if plea negotiations, sometimes a prosecutor won't give you anything, and maybe they don't have the authority to because their boss doesn't authorize them to negotiate as they wish they could. And so you're faced with a non-offer, you know, 30 years or life, try the case, you know, and then you have the appeal. So a lot of times our minds are thinking not just in terms of, you know, the immediate like trial issues, but how can I create a record so that then we have a chance to maybe go at this again. And if you win your appeal and you go back to the trial court, now maybe they'll negotiate with you. So you think about wins in a very complex way in criminal defense.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like it. So speaking of criminal defense, Molly, tell me about your most interesting case.
Okay, this is really interesting.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so.
Wait, hold on. Let me just.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, that actually is.
I don't usually do this on my show, but I feel like I'm getting ready for like an amazing story.
Whiskey is part of the story. Plum brandy is part of the story. So when I was a brand new, cheers. When I was a brand new.
Cheers. There we go.
Yeah. Baby federal defender. It was 2015. And I came into this office, the Atlanta office, which is incredible, very well funded, very well run. They do a great job. We did a great job no matter what case came before us. And we will investigate it, and we will call experts, and we will take it all the way. So this was one of those cases. I was brand new in the office, and there was a client who had been accused of making a false statement on an immigration form just 5 years ago, because you have, a statute of limitations. Immigration, it's 10 years, but usually it's 5 years. So it was a recent false statement in terms of him becoming a naturalized citizen. But what really was going on was the government was trying to get around the statute of limitations, and they used this to charge him because the false statement was whether or not essentially he was a war criminal running a concentration camp in Bosnia.
Jeez.
So I went to Bosnia.
Wow. Okay.
So basically, the team had already gone all over the world twice in preparation for this case. I was new. I was like, okay, well, this is fascinating. And then one of the lawyers had kind of, I think like an issue in terms of childcare or something, and she couldn't be on the case anymore because it was definitely going to require another trip to Bosnia. So I volunteered myself. And within a few months of starting this job, I was on a plane to a remote area of a war-torn country.
Yeah.
Defend somebody who was accused of conduct from like the early 90s. And the investigation was essentially renting a car, having an interpreter, and stopping people on these like rural sides of the road, like a man with his sheep, and be like, excuse me, sir, do you recognize this man? And hold up a photo of our client. Do you remember him from the 90s? What was he doing, right? This is what I spent weeks doing in a foreign country. This country, it was so obvious that the war was still so fresh in their minds. It was still so, divided in terms of like a country fresh from civil war. I mean, granted, the war ended in 96. It still felt so tense. It was so just controversial, everything we were doing. And ultimately, we had to depose witnesses there because we don't have subpoena power. So
Right.
we had to bring a videographer and like film all of this testimony. And then, of course, we went to trial, and it was such a crazy trial in that we had like two different interpreters working for us. One of them was actually Bill Clinton's interpreter from the 90s, this Bosnian interpreter.
Really?
And then we had so it was a big deal. It was in federal court. Then we had another interpreter, and they got in a fight, and one of them quit in the middle of the trial because, again, the country is so divided. Like if you're a Catholic Croat, if you're a Bosnian, if you're a Serb, and they were just from different, parts of the country, and they hated each other. I mean, it's just so tense and crazy. And then ultimately we lost at trial, and I got to do my first 11th Circuit oral argument.
Okay.
Which was cool too, kind of a big deal. And it was based on constitutional violations of not being able to bring in evidence and all this cool stuff.
That's amazing. I mean, I think people, when they're at law school, they're like, I want to argue the Constitution.
Exactly.
And they end up doing, I'm not going to like say what type of law they end up doing, but then they end up doing like some other like type of law, but I think the Constitution, I feel like is like.
I agree.
That's what piqued my interest, but again, it isn't really about me. That's super interesting. So that's cool. So you got to argue in front of this, like the circuit. That's
the federal, oral argument, and it was real crazy facts. I got to talk about traveling the world and why, just because we don't have subpoena power for international witnesses, why this evidence should have come in, and we should have had the right to cross-examine. And it's very complicated, but ultimately it was a time for me to kind of say, look at my office. We're public defenders, and we prepare cases like this.
Yeah, I mean, you're like. I think everybody should be as passionate about their job as you are. I think that's amazing. That's really good. And I feel really good for you, like about how passionate you are and how happy you seem about like what you're doing. I mean, or what you did in your past experiences and where it like led you today. It's definitely a story that like connects the dots, like even from your childhood, like it sort of like connects like when you look at it backwards. And I think like hopefully everybody in their lifetime can do that. They can like connect the dots somehow. Like I do want to add, if you're done with, do you want to say anything else about like the
Bosnia case?
Yes.
I think that's it. But okay. I will say I am happy. And I will say that, I think for me, one of the things I'm really lucky to have is the perspective of a poor kid. And now I have like this incredible life, and I am very grateful. I think if you go to law school, you have to come to it with a perspective of gratitude. It helps a lot. You know, we're lucky to be in this profession, you and I, and it is amazing. And you know, I am happy, and I think that that's pretty much why.
It's good. Yeah. Well, I could tell it, and it definitely like emanates. So I could feel it. So like, what's the difference really between being in private practice and like federal, or rather like working for the state, public defender work, or like what do you think?
So my first job out of law school, I was a state public defender. So I was part of one of the counties in Atlanta, and I fell in love with it. I did an internship there. And in Georgia, you can actually practice as an attorney if you have another attorney with you your third year. So I got to try a murder before I graduated law school, and I won.
Wow.
So that was, and then I remember the client held my hand when the verdict was read, and it was just amazing.
Wow.
You know, and so I was hired by that office after that, and was there for a couple years, and then I was a federal defender for 5 years. And it was, you know, being a public defender is amazing. Anybody that's interested in it, I can't recommend it enough. It's
hard to get into, though. Isn't it hard to become like a public defender, though? Like, do you have to be like really like top of your class? I mean, I
think it's changed. It used to be less, like I was the only person who wanted to be a public defender.
Right. No, I think it used to be left, and now it's like hard.
Now it's popular.
Hard. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I think now, because I was doing this 10 years ago, and I think back then people were like, why would you want to be a public defender? You don't make any money. And now people are like, crime podcasts and, you know, all these documentaries. Everyone's like, let's be a public defender, which is great. I love it, but it's very competitive, I do think. But I really like the people, right? Like the camaraderie. Like I was around a lot of like-minded individuals, like great, cool young people who were great trial lawyers and just kind of a bigger office. And I just loved that. And now I'm in private practice, and I didn't know anything. I never worked at a firm. I never worked for any kind of corporation. I never did anything but straightforward public interest.
But you have the work ethic, like that's, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a different world, because even though I'm a solo, I have my own firm, like I meet other lawyers that are not necessarily even criminal defense. And now I'm meeting people that I think, now I know why lawyers have a bad reputation, right? Like now for the first time since law school, I'm around these people that are very ego driven, very money driven, you know, so I had to learn that. There was a bit of a learning curve when I first went out in private practice, and I was like, oh man, kind of the same thing, like my 1L year. I was like, I don't like these people. You know, there are some dark, evil people here. And I'm not talking about my clients. I'm talking about practitioners. You know,
oh yeah.
I was shocked. I was horrified, but I just ignore them. I surround myself with good people. But that was really the biggest thing, is that my coworkers were so amazing. And so they were like me. They love the work and they believe in it. And now I'm in a world where there's a lot of self-loathing. They hate their jobs. They're very, you know, insecure. So you got to just choose who you surround yourself with in this field, especially in private practice, wisely, I've learned.
Do you think like there's a certain theme with lawyers, like they have like some certain personality trait? Like how would you kind of define that?
Yeah, I learned this all very recently. You know, I think public interest attorneys are great. They're nothing like this. But I do think that I've recently discovered that there is a segment of the population that feels compelled to become a lawyer for, I guess, the power, or they don't even care about litigating. Like I love litigating, but there's something about the prestige or the power or the ego. It feeds an ego. And that to me, I can't handle that at all, you know?
Right. Yeah.
It is what it is, man, but I've seen it, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. So you have a very interesting like thing going on. So like you're balancing being in the courtroom, you know, you're teaching at Emory, you're doing the court TV thing. Like tell me what's like a day like for Molly.
Yeah. So that's the cool thing about being in private practice. You know, my day was much more structured when I was a public defender and I had a boss and we had like a routine. Now I can do whatever I want. And so I really have found that I select my cases in a way where I don't take every person who calls me. You know, if they can pay me, that's not the only consideration. I really take on clients that I feel a connection to, and I'm very selective in that. And I develop a very deep relationship with them, you know, all of my clients and their families. And I have this very limited group of select clientele. And then I am very devoted to the teaching piece as well. And I just have to make sure that I have time for that. And my students, once a student, kind of like once a client, always a student, always a client, I still maintain so much contact. I do a lot of mentorship. I love law students, and I love providing an example for them that's like, listen, you don't have to follow the masses. You can do your own thing. It's all going to be fine. And they all took the bar today. A lot of them took the bar today. So I reached out, it was a big today. I had to make sure to touch base with these people. And
it's awesome.
I have that balance. And then also, I do, the media stuff I think is important. People are actually paying attention to criminal justice reform. So I feel lucky that I have a bit of a platform and people are actually listening. Whereas 10 years ago, they'd be like, you're crazy. You want to release people from prison? No, yeah, I do, And I think, the other thing is there's always, when you own a business, you can do the litigation, which I do, but there's also room to always have something new and different. I'm working on a course right now to train other lawyers. I have speaking engagements.
So you're working on a course? Like what kind of?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
What kind of course?
Yes, I'm doing this. It's a collaborative work with what lawyers do. And my piece is federal misdemeanor practice. So there's this whole world of like federal misdemeanors, like drugs on federal property, or an assault that occurs at the VA hospital, or a DUI on federal land, or bringing a gun to the airport. That's a misdemeanor. And so it's real easy for a lawyer who maybe works with veterans, and wants to take on these cases, or a lawyer who does state work and wants to get somewhat comfortable with federal work. You can handle these little misdemeanors. So I have a course that teaches lawyers how to take on this entire practice area in a kind of a manageable way. And it's a good introduction to the big deal federal stuff as well. So I do a lot of different stuff. I love that I have the ability to kind of take on whatever project is my next fun project. So it's not just the courtroom,
Wow. No, I mean, you do a lot of stuff, and I foresee a lot, carving out like bigger things too. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, not bigger. I mean, everything you're doing is amazing, but like, I think maybe you'll run like Court TV one day. Who knows? So I want to know, like, my last real thing for you is like, we've touched base about like music. I think that's like our first kind of connection we have. Like,
oh yeah,
and like the dead. Like, what was your dad like? Were they like Deadheads or anything, or like, were you into the Dead, or like, was you like fit? Like, tell me.
Yeah. Okay. So my parents were very into music. Like, music was a huge, huge part of my childhood. Music and art, very important. My parents were not Grateful Dead hippies. They were MC5. They were heavily armed. They were like White Panthers with the Black Panthers. My dad liked, really kind of more intense, radical, music. He did not like this move to California, live on a commune stuff at all.
Okay.
That's not at all what they were. They like rock and roll. I mean, my mom likes reggae and blues and roots and all of that, but my dad was not a Dead fan. But I think naturally for me, because I was raised by hippies and I grew up in the mid 90s, I was like, well, here's this band Fish. And I went to my first Fish show as like a high schooler.
Wait. Okay, so stop right there. What was the date? High schooler? I'm trying to figure out. So
I'm 38. So my first show was, I think it was.
God,
I'm not one of those people that counts shows and everything. But
no. You know what? It's ridiculous. I was in the bathroom line. I was in the bathroom line at one of these last like 4 shows I was at, and then some dude turns to me, he's like, "This is my 33rd show, man." And like, I'm not trying to be a dick. Like, I'm on record. This is going to be posted. I love the band, but the competitive nature about how many freaking shows you've been to, gotta stop.
I agree. I hate
gotta
that.
Stop.
I don't know. I don't count my shows, but
I know. I forgot. Like, I literally went through photo albums and like everything trying to figure it out because I like people want to know. This was before I went to a show. I think they played. I don't know. I went to one of the casinos in Mohegan Sun, Connecticut.
Oh yeah, Connecticut.
Yeah, and then I went like. Yeah, so, and then Rhode Island, I think I just went to a show in like Providence like a year ago or something, or 8 months ago, and I was trying to figure it out. I'm like, let's see if I have like some stubs hanging around here.
Yeah.
And like,
I like the ephemeral quality.
But tell me your first show, when? I'm just curious.
I don't know. It was either the summer of 98 or 99. They did those 2 summer tours, and I went to like Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. And the next summer did the same thing, and the next summer did the same thing.
Oh, so you kind of did like 3 at once. That's cool.
Yeah, well, I was in the South, man. Summer tour in the South. I still do it, except
What
for just,
about like, and people might fast forward this part, but that's okay.
yeah.
So what about like, widespread panic? I heard that's like the Fish of the South. Like,
I'm not a Panic fan.
no,
Yeah, I'm not a Panic
there
fan.
was like a
I
couple
like the
songs I heard. I
weirdness
never
of
really listened to
Fish.
them that much, but there were like a couple songs that were pretty
Yeah.
good.
A lot of my friends, man, I definitely run in a circle of a lot of hardcore Panic fans. But for me personally, I like Fish. And then I got into the Dead later, but I'm very, very into the Dead now. It's powerful music,
So I think my first show was sophomore year in high school. I think I probably told you this, DM 12/11/95. I'm from Maine, so it was sophomore year of high school, Cumberland County Civic Center. We it was amazing. It was a my friend opener, and it was just, I don't know, like I just remember like the dun, 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 and like Warren Hayes from the Allman Brothers came out, I guess, and it was awesome. Like, and I've been to like a lot of like shows here and there. Like I never toured or anything, but since
same.
but it's incredible because it's like a theme of your life. I mean, when you've been seeing a band for like 20 years, 25 years of your life, it's like a theme. You know what I'm saying? So it's I try to see them like when they come around, and that's like Miami. I'm like, let's go. My friend Berm, I'm gonna shout Berm out. Like I was like, dude, we're gonna get floor seats in Miami, and we're gonna do this. And they busted out Mike's song, second set opener. I was pumped. All right.
I think I was there, man. I think I was there.
Were you?
It's a funny thing. Like, you bond with people. I think when I first reached out to you, I'm like, hey, I liked your blog. I liked your Instagram account. Will you put me on there? And I was like, by the way, I'm wearing a Grateful Dead shirt.
Yeah. So the Grateful Dead's really interesting, and I know we might get some fast forwards here too. We could probably talk more about this offline, but so like I have a little son. He's 21 months, and so like over the pandemic, I was working at home a little bit. So we would I wanted to get him onto some like a little bit different music than he was hearing. So I would go to YouTube and he would we would watch some Grateful Dead, like song, like as much as he could pay attention to, and he loves it. Now he goes up to the speaker. I have like this little siren speaker in the kitchen, and he's like, dead, dead, dead. And he wants to like hear it. Like, so we literally did like a video, like we've taped it to the song Bertha.
Oh, I know.
Maybe I'll send it to you later. Anyway, we're getting off topic.
But yeah, I consider myself a Deadhead. I love Fish. I've been around. Cool. Like usually, if it wasn't a pandemic, you would find me. Atlanta has a good music scene. Like I do a lot of music things.
That's awesome. All right, so Molly, like this has been so much fun. Like, is there anything else like that we left out that you want to tell everybody? Like, because hopefully you're gonna use one of your classroom times to show this to your students at Emory. So like, what do you want to tell? No, I'm just kidding. What do you want to tell like everybody out there? Like, is there anything else, or how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah.
If they're watching this and.
Sure. I mean, if there's anything else, I don't know. I guess I would say, like I said, I've said to you before, this idea of lawyer stories, humanizing lawyers, I actually think is incredibly important, right? Like every time I have a client, part of my job is to humanize that client. And I've almost forgotten until I got in private practice, I guess, that lawyers do have sometimes an earned, but sometimes not, bad reputation for being, a certain way and maybe soulless and lacking depth. Right. And what's cool about lawyer stories is that you expose this other side of us. Like we're lawyers, but we're people, and we're actually interesting people. And some of us really love the job and we find incredible virtue and purpose in the job. And I love that you're kind of standing up for the profession as a whole and being like, look, we're not all, aggressive megalomaniacs. Some of us are very cool and, like-minded. So
right. I mean, so like some people did go to law school to be a personal injury lawyer and make as much money as they can. And that's amazing. That's great. That's what you did. But, for me, it's like, I want to humanize the profession. Like, I feel that lawyers, I'm personally a sociologist at heart. And like, I feel like a lot of lawyers are, and they go to law school for social issues and to battle those things and to learn how to advocate. So I knew it would be like some interesting stories. And so like, I wanted to launch this thing, and like, it's become a passion. And I love it. I honestly, like, it's great. Like, I love hearing from everybody, and it's different than an Instagram page, if I'll just give a plug for a minute, because, I don't just take people's pictures and put it on my account. Like, I literally get emails from everybody across the globe wanting to be on Lawyer Stories. This has become a second job for me, and I want it to keep growing. Like, I want to, I would love to see some more views on the podcast. I would love to, just to keep growing it for the profession. But I really appreciate you coming on, Molly. Like, you have an amazing story. Like, I hope we were able to illustrate and explain how, like, important and how cool, like, your life has been. And I think, like, you're going to continue to do, like, some incredible things.
Well, thanks. And I'll plug, if you want to talk about Instagram, I have a pretty active Instagram, which is my name, Molly Parmer, MOLLYPARMER. And my website is parmer.law, PARMER.LAW. But thanks for having me. I'm glad you think I'm cool. That means a lot, especially because you got the Cali Award for criminal procedure.
Maybe I could, like, if we meet in person, maybe I'll bring it. We could take, like, a picture, like, next to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
That would work along with the best evidence rule and federal rules of evidence. I need the original.
The best evidence rule. That, like, I haven't heard that in 15 years. So, Molly Parmer, everyone. Awesome, amazing attorney in Atlanta, criminal defense. Thank you all for tuning in. Tell your friends. We're going to keep growing this thing. It's going to be the biggest inter-lawyer connection that you ever did see. Wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves. Cheers.
The Lawyer Stories podcast is produced by Marketing the Law. Are you looking at your social presence every day? Potential clients are. Learn how to magnetize your brand with the help of Marketing the Law. Find us on Instagram at Marketing the Law to learn more.